Sales isn't what you think it is. You might be thinking, Dan, that is the most ridiculous thing that I have heard. Of course, I know what sales is. It is a transfer of value. It is all of these things. It is getting goods and service. It's doing that. But when most people think about sales, when most people think about the word sales, what do they think about? What comes to your mind? If I tell you we're going to talk about sales, what's the very first thing that comes to your mind? For a lot of people, it is that it's squicky. It's gross. It's I don't want to do that. I'm never going to be a salesperson. Or if they've sold before, it can be I don't want to do that again. I don't want to feel like that again. I don't want to be that way again. And tonight, I want to share with you some different thoughts, some different insights, and I want to answer your questions about sales as well. Who am I? I have a sales and coaching background that goes for seemingly ever, and I guess that just tells you how old I am. I've spent over 25 years in sales, helping hundreds of people to make six figures selling. I actually have been training material like this for a long time, and I typically offer this as part of my paid programs, but I want to come out here on YouTube and do a weekly live. This is my very first YouTube live. So goodness gracious, hope it's going well. Let me know what you think. Let me know what I can improve, what I should do different. I am completely in. I also apparently need a drink. And I could mean that in a lot of different ways. So we are going to be talking about sales. What it means and really what the barriers we have to doing well at sales. If you pause and you just have that instinctive reaction, you might run from sales. You might say, "Oh, I'm never going to deal with it, I don't want to get objections. I don't want to make people feel bad." But the truth is, every single person is a salesperson. Every person persuades somebody of something. Maybe you persuaded your significant other to go get dinner. Maybe you persuaded your kid to go to bed. If you did, man, you're a good salesperson. That's just a fact. If you had to persuade somebody maybe to give you time off or to trade a shift with you or to work late or to follow a rule or any of those things, those are a form of sales. Throughout our conversation here and elsewhere, I will talk about this interchangeably with persuasion. Because maybe that's a less gross way, a more palatable way to think about sales is with persuasion. And I'll share with you, assuming that, and I'm glad to answer questions and jump in and talk about what you'd like to, objections that you encounter that you want to know how to handle, or things about sales that you struggle with. But I spend my life helping my clients to sell more things. They also are planning the strategy. I'm a strategy and skills coach. So we plan what they're going to be selling. We talk about how it can help the world and all of that. And almost exclusively, one of the first things that I have to get out of the way with them is that they hate sales and selling. In fact, I have one client who I adore, who I've had for a couple of years. She's amazing. The first time we met, she just said, "I'm never going to sell. I hate sales. I hate everything about it. I'm not going to do it." And I smiled, because you can't just argue with that right then, right? I may be thinking in my head, yeah, that's going to change. Only if you want to be successful, though. So why do most people hate sales and selling? If you either now or ever did hate sales and selling, why is that? What do you dislike about it? What gets in your way? I find that most people don't like it because they think of it as manipulation. They think of it as, I have to get somebody to do something that they don't want to do. And that couldn't be further from the truth if you're doing it right. When I was learning in home sales, when I was out selling home improvements, I was taught how to do all of those things, all the manipulative tactics, all the psychological things, all of the messy things. And I steadfastly refused to do them. Will I take the principles that I learned there and apply them? Absolutely. But I believe that sales is about helping people. Sales is about, in some cases, uncovering a need that someone didn't know that they had. They may not have recognized that they had, and helping them to see that. Maybe it's sharing solutions with them they may not have been aware of. But it is not, when done properly, about getting somebody something that they don't want or need. And that's important, because I think that's a lot of the reason that people dislike selling. Secondly, is something I mentioned before, is when we think about hating sales and selling, we got to recognize we're all salespeople. We're all persuasion machines. We all have to convince people of things. The only choice is whether we're good at it or not. So it isn't, am I going to be a salesperson or am I not going to be a salesperson? It's, am I choosing to be good at it? Am I choosing to invest in myself to get better at it, to understand the skills and the perspectives that help me to get the thing that I'm looking for that is better for the world, better for the people around me more often? If not, then I'm going to struggle to go forward. I'm going to struggle to move. There are a few things that everybody is. Everybody's a leader. Leadership is influence, and everybody is. It's just whether you're good at it. Everybody is a salesperson. Also, everybody's a communicator, and everybody is a steward of time. Those four things are the foundations of success. All of those four things are things that you use every day. They're things that we'll talk about in these weekly lives. And if you can't do those, you are missing it. You will not go where you want to go. So that is very important for you to understand. Then if we begin to flip it around and say, what is sales all about? Sales is about people. It's not about a product or service. So many people that I encounter initially, they're like, well, I don't want to sell a thing. Well, that's good. You're not selling a thing. I don't want to be out there and feel like I'm pushing something. That's great, because you're not. Sales is about people. It's about connecting with the person and helping them get what they want and need. It's about education in many cases, but it's truly about being of service rather than selling a service. When I share about the coaching that I do, a lot of times I'm sharing, hey, here's what I do. Here's the impact that it's had. But more often than not, it's my clients who say, hey, can you work with me? Would you work with me? Would you help me? Would you help me make that difference? Why? Because I've helped them uncover something that will be beneficial to them. So then we understand, if we take that piece and then we look at this first barrier, this thing that people hate selling, one more note about it is that process and structure drive behavior, and both ours and our clients matter. So process. What does that mean? That means that if you're going to sell, and we'll talk more about this in a bit, and I'm glad to answer questions if you have them, but there are structures, there are goals that need to be accomplished for a persuasion to be complete. You got to have, we'll get into this as well, but you talk about the fact that if they like you and trust you, they'll buy from you. And if you transfer energy and belief, then people will buy from you. Strange how that works. It's really not complicated, but the process is, I have to engage with somebody with something outside of work or outside of the persuasion I'm making. I've got to have a real connection. Then I've got to find out what matters to them and ask some questions around that. Then they've got to see me as a good resource for providing that. Then I should present what are the alternatives, help them consider what are the alternatives that they could consider, and then explain what the cost is. Now, the cost might be a half hour of their time. It might be dollars. It might be handing me a piece of paper. Look, the cost varies, but I present that and then help them make the decision that's right for them, and then leave them in a better place than I found them. That is the structure, and I gave that very loosely. I do a lot of detailed training in this area. I have hundreds of hours of training for sales, but this is a nice overview of some of the barriers that we have. So barrier one, most people hate sales and selling. Barrier two is that people think a presentation is for selling. And in fact, many people that I meet, they hate the word presentation. Oh man, I don't want to make a presentation. I don't want to put together my presentation. Guess what, guys? It's a term. It's a label. It's something that helps us know what we're talking about. It doesn't mean that it has to be a formal flip chart like I used to take into customers' homes. It doesn't mean that it has to be a PowerPoint presentation. It means that there are components that we put together. So let me ask you, and if you're seeing this, answer this in the comments. What is the purpose of a sales presentation? What is the purpose of a sales presentation? And I'm going to just talk for about 10 or 20 seconds, and then I'll give you the answer. But I want to give you a chance to write it in the comments or to write it down or to think about it. What is the purpose of a sales presentation? And this is very unusual in terms of the thought process, because most people have one answer. What do you think that answer is? That answer is, that purpose is to sell things. And I'm here to tell you, that's not it. The purpose of a sales presentation is not to sell. The purpose of a sales presentation is to eliminate objections before they occur. It is to eliminate problems. It's to eliminate the concerns that someone else might have. It's to answer the questions before they come up. If you do that and you do that very well, then guess what happens? You get to the end and it doesn't feel bad. It doesn't feel difficult. It feels like, well, of course we're going to make this agreement. Of course, we're going to do business. Of course, of course, of course. It's the natural outcome when we recognize that the purpose of a sales presentation is to eliminate objections before they occur. Another note about that, if you get to the end and someone says, I want to think about it, or I need some time, or let me get back with you, it tells you that you did not eliminate something. Yeah, you may have to handle that then and do your best to talk about it, but it tells you there's something you did not eliminate. It is a time in that presentation to eliminate objections before they occur. Let's talk about number 3. We have number 1, most people hate sales and selling. That gets in their way of selling. Number 2, people think a presentation is for selling. It's not. And number 3, this is one of my favorites, is that everyone prejudges. You ever caught yourself prejudging? Do you know what I mean when I say that? You ever feel like you know something about somebody and then you find out, oh, I didn't. I was wrong. I missed it. Well, take that into the realm of sales, and that is ramped up 1,000 times over. It is, oh man, it just happens every time. I had the instinct to do it, although as I'll share in a moment, I got really kicked out of that pretty early, and I'm so thankful for it. But I find that when I talk to salespeople and I say, well, why, or I talk to entrepreneurs and I ask them, well, why is it that you didn't do this thing? Oh, I didn't share it with them because they didn't have any money, or I didn't share it with them because they wouldn't have wanted it, or I didn't share it on this social media platform because I didn't think it would get to enough people. Guys, stop prejudging. You don't know. Let me give you an example from my personal world. It's one of my very favorite examples because it's one of the very first sales presentations that I went on in my first straight commission job. I had sold before this. I sold at Sears selling computers. And I mean, back in the day when 4 megabytes of RAM was a lot, I sold and protection plans became one of the top in the country. I sold power equipment. I did all that. But then I got married and I went, this is crazy enough, I went to sell straight commission home improvements going into people's homes on telemarketed leads. Now, if you've done that, put it in the comments. Let me know that I have a friend out there. Let me know that I got someone who understands out there. And if you're liking this content, please take a moment and subscribe. Click that button. I'd love to share more content with you as we go forward. We've got some cool stuff coming. We have some pretty cool stuff out there, but we're focusing more on this platform. So for me, I was on my first sale, and I want you guys to picture this. I had just gotten married. I got illegally fired from my other job that was nice and secure. I accepted a straight commission job. I'm in my early 20s. I'm driving 40 minutes from home just to get to the office, straight commission, so not getting paid for that. I show up. I do my 2 weeks of training for free. I then get released from my training and I get told to go to my first sales appointment, which is down in Detroit. I had never in my life been in Detroit before. I drove down into Detroit. This is old paper maps, trying to figure out where I'm going. I pull up on the block and I look around and I'm like, wait a minute, this can't be right. Every house but one on the block was burnt down. And I was like, oh man, this can't, or torn down or whatever. This can't be good. I parked my little Ford Probe right out front of the house. Sure enough, that was the number. I go up and I nervously knock on the door. Remember, this is my first presentation. I've literally never done another presentation. So I go knock on the door, and all that's going through my head is what they had told me in training, which is don't prejudge, don't prejudge, don't prejudge. And that's just like an echo chamber in my head. And they opened the door, and it was a nice enough couple. They invite me in, and inside it looked like hoarders gone wild. It was nuts. There were piles everywhere. There was stuff all over the place. And so I looked, we actually had to scrape me a place to sit. It was really rough. Keeping in mind, first appointment ever, this is my welcome to the job. So I sit down and I go through my presentation. When we go into the kitchen, there's bugs everywhere. I had no idea how to price for bug removal. I was selling cabinets, but I called my boss on the landline, of course, because we didn't have cell phones at this point. This is still when I had to stop by and interrupt drug dealers at payphones to result my sales at the end. But we called them, got a price for bug removal. We get to the end, and again, all that's going through my mind is don't prejudge, don't prejudge, don't prejudge. I get to the end and I look at them, and they were a nice enough couple, and I say, well, would you? I was so nervous. Would you like to pay cash or finance? And they looked at me and they paused for a second. And they said, well, we'll do cash. We've been saving up for this for a few years. And they went in the other room, got the down payment, and it was a done deal. I ended up going back and seeing that kitchen done and just being excited. I have pictures of it in my photo book, my very first sale ever. I would never have gotten that had I prejudged. There are thousands of things that we prejudge in the world, and understand this: prejudging does you no benefit. You may be thinking, but Dan, I'm going to be right. Yes, you're going to be right. Probably 70% of the time, maybe even 80 if your instinct and your experience is good, but you're going to be wrong 20% of the time. And you get hurt nothing by taking a shot. You get hurt a huge amount by not taking a shot. And almost invariably, the difference between the best salespeople and adequate salespeople was that the best salespeople did it every time. There were some other components that came in that we could help, but this is one that's completely in your control. So that's number 3. Everyone prejudges. We've got these 6 barriers to that we have to overcome in our own self if we're going to go out and sell. Number 1 was the fact that most people hate sales and selling. Number 2, people think a presentation is for selling. It's not. Number 3, everyone prejudges. Number 4, we hate to see people in pain, and so we avoid it. You might be wondering, what in the hell is he talking about? What does this mean? Well, what this means is that people buy things or people make changes in their lives because they feel a pain or they have a problem. But most salespeople, especially heart-centered salespeople, they want to do everything that they can to avoid that pain. They want to not have people feel that pain. They want to have people not sit in it and do the thing that got them to even have the conversation in the first place. If I ask somebody what's the least favorite part of the sales process, almost exclusively it is that we want to skip over what we call the assessment, which is where we remind people of the struggle that they have. We're never going to increase it falsely, but we're going to remind them of the level that they're really at when they're not around people, and letting them sit in that, letting them feel that. That is almost exclusively it. The other one is asking for the sale, is actually putting the price on the table or asking for whatever it is that they want, closing the deal however you like it. Those are the two big answers that we get. What's your least favorite part of persuasion or of bringing something up? When we think of a sales presentation, or we think of being persuasive with somebody, I mentioned earlier, we have that making a connection with them. But the second part is learning about them, learning what's important to them, learning what got them to even want to have the conversation or look at the website or click on the link or walk into my store. And we don't like to do that part. We like to just go to, hey, I've got some great stuff. Don't you want it? Which is terrible, because if I don't think I have a need for something, then why would I want it? If I haven't connected with you, why would I want it? So that is really, really important. And when I'm training sales, I spend time working with how do you help people get there? And also, let's get rid of this barrier. There are so many people that have this mindset that to be good at sales, you have to get somebody to feel pain that isn't real or that's higher than they would normally feel. That is not true. What I want is for someone to feel like they feel when they're alone. So I'll go back to the kitchens. When I was out selling kitchens, I would walk in and I would start asking questions, right? If I just went into my presentation, they'd be like, we don't need a kitchen. But if I start asking questions, how long have you been thinking about getting your kitchen done? 10 years. Well, why haven't you gotten it done? Because I couldn't get my husband to do it. Well, why do you want it done? Oh, because it's got a leak under the sink, and I've got leaks going to the basement, and my doors are falling off, and my countertops falling off. It's amazing. I would ask questions, and all this stuff came out. But if I just walked in and just ask like the first question, just, well, what is it that's important to you about a kitchen? I'd be like, oh, it's fine. We're probably not even going to get one. It is amazing how much we suffer within our own, that when we go out in public or meet somebody else, that we rationalize. And so the job, if you're going to be persuasive, is to connect people with where they really were and what they were really failing. And if you don't, it's just like a doctor who meets you and never asks about what symptoms you've been feeling and for how long and how that's affected your life and what that's caused. You're not going to take whatever advice they give you because you haven't connected that there's a need. On the other hand, if you have talked to them and they see that there's a need, now they're all ears for what comes next. Now you can have that really significant conversation that comes next. So we must understand and highlight an existing need before we solve a problem. You can't solve a problem that someone doesn't even agree exists. Also, by the way, you might be trying to solve the wrong problem. You may have prejudged them and assumed that they were feeling something, and then they weren't. I know a bunch of times I'd go out and I'd be thinking, oh man, this kitchen looks terrible. We really got to do that countertop. And the wife would be like, no. We got that countertop done 2 years ago. I love it. But these cabinets I hate. I'm like, the cabinets look great. She said, no, but I hate that color and it makes me sick every time I see it. And lo and behold, we do the cabinets and not the counter. And had I just made an assumption, I would have been completely wrong. And so that's important. Always remember, you can't solve a problem that others don't accept exists and matters. And the purpose of you being in whatever conversation you are from a persuasion standpoint is to either relieve a pain or solve a problem. So that's number 4. Number 5, is this helpful? Is this connecting? What are you gaining from it? I'd love if you guys are listening. What is something that you are taking away that's resonating with you that you go, oh, I might need to be better at that, or I might need to, that's got me to think differently. I'd love to hear from you. So number 5, objections bring out our base responses. Man, everybody hates objections. Heck, I hate objections. I have trained about handling objections for 25 years. And I still don't love to get them. Now, I don't love to get them for a different reason than you might not. You might not love to get them because you start to feel either shame or fear or manipulation or all those things. For me, I hate to get them because I go, damn it, I missed something in my presentation. I missed something in my connection. I didn't do as well as I needed to before now. I have no fear of handling them, of having a conversation. And part of that is because I get that as a whole, objections bring out our base responses. They bring out our responses that are like fight or flight. I think back to when I was first handling objections, when I would first go out and sell. And I would sit there and I would do this great presentation. Remember, I was straight commission. So I'd do this phenomenal presentation in my mind, right? My mind was convinced it was perfect. It may not have connected with them at all, but it was perfect. And since I was straight commission, if I didn't sell, I didn't eat. That was a problem. So I would get done and I would look at them and I would say, what is it? You know, as we get done, like, you know, what do you love about it? I do all the good things. I get the tie downs. And then I would say, would you like to pay cash or finance? And I'd sit back like ready to collect my money, ready to collect the sale and the signatures. And sometimes they would look at me and they would say, Dan, we like this, but we really want to think about it. And my initial response was, what do you want to think about? I would like lean forward and I would be frustrated and I would be like wanting to throw something like, what do you want to think about? This is ridiculous. Why do you need to think about it? That was totally an emotional response. It was emotional because in my mind, I judged it to be great. I'd done all the work. Where's my money? Damn it. That was where it was. But that's not how it works. Also, when I got into my logical brain, I realized that's not how it works. And so I needed to get rid of that emotional response. Now, that's one emotional response. You hear something you don't like. Think back to the last time you were talking to maybe your significant other or your parent, and you were having a conversation and they give you a response you didn't want. Did you do what I just did? Did you kind of like lean in and be like, why not? How dare you? Did you kind of have that emotional response? Or did you maybe have a different emotional response? Maybe you went to the other side of it. Maybe you heard it and you went, oh, okay. And you just kind of put down your head a little bit and you walked away. That's like tail between your legs. We tend to have a base response of either fight or flight, one of the two. And it's good to know which one you are. I'm the fight. That's my natural. And I can do some of the other, but that's natural. Both of those are not where we want to be. It's important you understand which one you are so that you have an idea what the prescription is to be able to fix it, to be able to handle it in a better way. The best way to handle objections instead of either fighting or fleeing is to pause and get a breath to let our brain engage, and then ask some questions. In fact, I like to call this learn to lyric. And the lyric is a process you'll find in sales. Or persuasion, there's a process for everything. And lyric, Laric, I encourage you to write that down. Laric is listen, acknowledge, restate, isolate, and close. Now, that may sound complicated. I promise you it's not. And I'll touch on just the first few when this isn't an objection handling training, unless you've got questions in the comments, in which case I'm glad to jump into one in a moment. But when you think about this, when I want to avoid the fight or flight, the first thing I need to do is breathe. And that means I need to actually listen, not listen with the intent to reply or respond, but rather listen with the intent to understand. For me, the way that I do that is that I implement a pattern interrupt. I need to get out of that emotion. And I don't need long to do it. I need about maybe a second and a half. And so when I was out selling, the way that I would get past it is that I would make myself cross my leg. So I'd hear their response. I'd make myself cross my leg, which made me sit back, and it forced me to take in a breath. That second and a half was all I needed to come out of the emotion and maybe breathe out. Because when I was ready to respond, I was like, and I was ready to go after them. In that second and a half, I just go, and I let it out. And I'm like, oh, now my brain engaged. Now I can think. Now I can be calm. Now I can realize it isn't their responsibility to buy. It is my responsibility to help them. It's as simple as that. And then I want to build a relationship with them that has them looking at something and saying, oh yeah, where I'm at, it's okay. It's existed. I've made it this far. Here's the other option I have. I like the other option better, and I want that. That is my goal. Is not to say where you're at sucks. They've already said that. They already know that. They already know that they don't want to be where they are, or we wouldn't be having the conversation. We wouldn't be this far into it. And so I've got them there. I don't need to bash them with that. Instead, I want to present another option and then just ask them, hey, would you prefer to stay where you are, or would you prefer to be in this new place? And to have the natural no-brainer decision be, I'd like to be in this new place. Once I get this objection, I recognize, oh, I've missed that a little bit, but that's still what I need to accomplish. And so first I listen. I listen with the intent to understand. Then I acknowledge. A lot of people struggle with this. It's actually the easiest step. It's said the same way pretty much every time. It's super short. It's just, I can certainly appreciate that. It's just saying, hey, I hear you. What you're saying, I get it. Like I understand that you feel that way. Like, totally cool. So I listen, and then I go, I can certainly appreciate that. And then there's the restate. It's this, think of this as what you just heard. You're going to restate it in a way that lets them know that you heard them, and that connects it to how to make sure that you're on the same page, that you're hearing it the right way. And when I'm restating it, I'm also restating it into something that I can handle, or that I know what's really behind it. You ever hear somebody say a sentence and you're like, they mean something other than that. This is that. If somebody says, I want to talk to my great grandmother's dead Uncle Rob, it isn't that they want to talk to that person. It's what? It's that they want to make sure they're getting the best value for their dollar. And they felt like that was the validation that they might need. So my case is restating it to be about getting the best value for their dollar. So the restate is, I start with the acknowledge. I can certainly appreciate that. If I understand you correctly, like most people I talk to, you just want to, it sounds like you just want to make sure you're getting the best value for your dollar. Is that a fair statement? Or like most people, it sounds like you want to make sure you're making the most informed decision. Is that the fair statement? Whatever it is, you can do that restate. And then there's an isolate. And I'm giving this to you very formally. This can work in a lot of different ways. I'm glad that with my training, I role play it and walk through it. But I want to give you the formal steps so that you can break it down. The isolate, once they go, oh yeah, that's fair. That's when you say, hey, so other than that, you know, other than you just wanting to be totally sure that you're getting a great value. Are there any other concerns that you have? And they're either going to go yes or no. And here's the magic. If they say, no, there's nothing else, then good, you can move on and you can handle that. That's the objection handling part. If they say, oh yeah, there's this other thing, then what they just said, what you went through, it doesn't exist. It's not real. And I'm not going to spend time handling that objection. I'll say, oh, I can certainly appreciate that. And I'll go right through it again. And you may think that people would pick up on you doing that 3 or 4 times. They do not. Our mind doesn't work that way. It's kind of like fixtures in a store. We walk by it 2 or 3 times. The third time, we don't even see it. It doesn't even exist in our head. So knowing that can change your perspective. Knowing that can help you a little bit. It can also help you to save any concerns you have to where you're handling the right thing. I'm not trying to argue with anybody. And I also don't want to address something and then I get done and they go, oh, well, I've got these other 5 things. That doesn't make sense. We used to call that shooting the civilians. There's you think about it like you have a few ways that you can handle an objection. And maybe you know 1, maybe you know 30, maybe you know 300, but either way, there's a limited number. And you can talk yourself out of things easier than you can into it. So we want to say the least and help. And we also want to only help what makes the biggest difference and what's really finding out if there's something that's real that's in the way, or if there's something that's like, oh, that was just a misunderstanding, or there was a way that we can help with that we can solve that issue. And if you're solving that issue, you're better off. So since I have a limited amount of resources, I want to apply them only to quote unquote real objections rather than just excuses or things that are being said. That's why I isolate until I get to where I have 1. And the reason we called it shooting the civilians is there's a military exercise where people will go into what they call the kill house, and they'll be given say 5 bullets, and there'll be maybe 10 pop-ups that are going to come, and only 5 of them are bad guys. And if they waste even 1, then they lose. So we want to make sure that we're only using things on the quote bad guys, which are the real objections, if that makes sense. So that is that objection path is what would set you up then to be able to handle them. And it gets rid of that fight flight response, which is one of the things, these base responses. It's one of the things people express to me that they hate or kind of gets in their own way from selling. The 5th or the 6th one, good grief. So we've walked through, let's quick recap. Most people hate sales and selling. We've talked about that. We talked about people thinking a presentation is for selling. We've talked about how everyone prejudges, how we hate to see people in pain, so we avoid bringing it up, and how objections bring out our base responses. The last big objection that gets in the way of people selling, that kind of are like the objections you've got to overcome in yourself before you can even really truly learn selling, is that it's easy to get overwhelmed by numbers. A ton of people, they start thinking of sales and numbers, just spreadsheets, all that just start going in front of them, pricing sheets and all of that. And I like to, with my clients, just solve that a little bit and make it calmer. Anytime you add complexity, you're creating issues. So I like to simplify it. Right? Complexity is the enemy of progress. And while structure drives behavior, so do simple systems. And I want to give you a simple system to just answer the question of what numbers are important in sales. And there are only 3. If you work or have worked for a corporation that does a lot of sales, you may see 500 numbers. But there are basically 3 when on the sales side of the business. And those 3 determine everything. Think of it like a 3-legged stool. All of the other numbers almost certainly come off of these. Those 3 numbers, and we use them as we build your sales equation in our sales training. Those 3 numbers are how many people you talk to, how many of them you sell, and how much you sell each one. That's it. How many people you talk to, how many of them you close or sell something to, and how much you sell each one. Those are the only 3 numbers that drive everything else. You could argue for retention coming in there and all that, but really those 3, every other number comes off of those. And if you look at your business and you're planning your business as an entrepreneur, keeping it simple, keeping it clear, and saying these are the only 3, and let's just affect one of them at a time, that'll help you to stay calmer. The easiest one to affect is how much I'm selling each person, because if they already like me, trust me, and are buying from me, the likelihood is they're going to buy more, or they're going to engage with more. And so that is the one that's the easiest to move, although it has the lowest upside because it's incremental on top of something that's already there. So I love to do it, and it's the easy one. It's the low-hanging fruit that we go after. The one that makes the biggest impact is talking to more people, because if you're talking to 10 people, even if you increase your closing, your how many of them buy from you by 10%, you only got one more. But if I go instead and talk to 20 people, I might have gained 3 more. So it's really about how many more people can I talk to. That is the hardest one to impact, because that's what paid advertising is about. It's what organic marketing is about. It's what all of these are about. That's the marketing side of the business, but it is also the most rewarding, and that's why so many people focus upon it. So keep that simplified to 3 numbers that drive everything. If you overcome these 6 objections in your own world, in your own heart, in your own soul, if you will, then you will sell more. You will sell, and you will sell more. Then you can say, now that I've connected with that, how do I become a student of sales? How do I learn how to handle objections? How do I learn how to build a presentation? How do I learn how to do these things? Here's something that's very interesting. Even without any of the objection handling and the presentation building, all of which will help you, even without it, if you have just solved these 6 issues and gotten past them in your own mind, you will convert, because people like you and you're pretty fantastic. And presumably you're offering something that people need, that is a response to a pain that they were feeling or a problem that they had. And because you will get some. And then it's just, how do you get more? How do you help other people in such a way that you get more? What questions do you have? What objections do you have? What concerns do you have? What are you taking away? I would, as always, love any feedback that you have in the comments. Each week, I'm going to come out here, and some weeks it's going to be an update, and we'll talk about our business, how we're building our Foundations of Success online learning platform from very little to over $1 million in recurring revenue in 1 year. And we're doing that from launch, and launch is actually in about 10 days. And so we're going to be building that to $1 million in 1 year. And we're going to talk about the behind the scenes. We'll have a bunch of shorter videos about that as well. You can look on our channel. I encourage you to bring others to our channel and put your comments, put what you'd like to hear covered. If you've got something that you'd say, man, in week 2 or week 5, I want to see this covered. I'd love you to touch on this topic. Bring it. It doesn't have to be about sales. It can be about anything in the strategy and skills world of business, entrepreneurship, heart-centered leadership. Take your pick. And I would love to give you guys a reward and just a thank you for jumping in. If you were to go to foundationsofsuccess.leadersmustlead.com, and you go right there, put in your information for a free profile, and you will get access to a 2-hour training on leadership. Now, in that platform, we also have trainings about sales and the power of small numbers and structure and strategy, and you're more than welcome to register for the platform as well. It's only a couple $100 a month. We keep it super affordable, but mostly what I want to do is give you this opportunity to learn about personal growth in a different way than maybe you have in the past. I appreciate you so very much, and I look forward to seeing your comments and questions. I'd also love your feedback. This is my very first YouTube Live. There are more to come. I will be out here every Monday with an upload here, plus some other videos that we're bringing in. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. I truly hope this helps you to get over some of the barriers you had to selling, to sell or to sell more, and to feel more comfortable being the most effective person with persuasion that you can possibly be. Thank you for being you. Have a wonderful week.